Hey all, welcome to Film Suck, a Patreon podcast in which we ponder the work of art in the age of crap cinema and television. I'm Eileen Jones.
I'm Dolores McElroy.
Just a note about what we're wearing. Today we are talking about the Chris Fleming HBO special Live at the Palace, and he's wearing pretty fabulous glam rock wear, and I have nothing glam rock to wear. So I'm wearing a complete green velour tracksuit, which is my own. Sometimes you just need some velour. And this vaguely matching scarf that's just semi-sheer with velvet patches, and that's as close as I could get. Dolores, however, did better.
Whatever. I feel like Chris would totally approve. I'm not gonna. Chris wears glasses. These are very like Sue Mangers, 70s agent.
70s. Yeah.
I don't think I can keep on for much longer. They're not my I don't have a prescription, but they're a prescription, and they're hurting my face. This is sort of the Judy Garland show.
Yes.
Got going.
Which is very nice because he wears, as you've specified, bedazzled Capriccios shoes, and they're kind of like a more flat-heeled version of Dorothy's red, sparkly Wizard of Oz shoes. So very
Yeah.
nice touch. So he's got a fabulous outfit on. We will get into the outfit in a full section later, talk
Yeah.
about the designer and everything else. It's important to the effect of the special.
Yeah.
But anyway, before we get going, I'm Eileen Jones. This is Dolores McElroy, and I have to do a quick shout out. I was a guest once again on the fabulous video podcast Movie Night Extravaganza, with its hosts Forrest Flacco Miller, Conan Neutron, and Christina Oakes. Conan was away that evening, but Forrest and Christina gave me a warm welcome. We were talking about the Testament of Anne Lee, and the episode was live on Friday, March 20th, but it's still available on YouTube and various other venues. They're all over to watch. If you recall, we did a Film Suck episode on the Testament of Anne Lee, and it really is an interesting movie. There's some really unique aspects to it. We disagreed. Dolores hated it. I liked a lot of it. But it was much more thumbs up. If you want a more positive take, it was much more thumbs up on Movie Night Extravaganza. So anyway, I enthusiastically recommend this episode. And that's it for today's shout out. So let's get back to our topic for today. And a hot topic it is. This new HBO special, again, very, very plainly called Chris Fleming Live at the Palace, given what it's like. You may have or may not have heard of the comedian Chris Fleming. He's got a huge online following for his many hilarious YouTube videos. These include the 40 episode. I didn't realize it was a 40 episode until I looked this up. DIY comedy series Gale that first brought him cult fame, ran from 2012 to 2015, and it's about his character Gale Waters. And I'll just quote a description. I think it's from a New York Times profile, I'm pretty sure, on Fleming, who is a histrionic suburbanite based in part on Fleming's own mother, who co-stars as Gale's best friend Bonnie. It's real. You might have seen like Company Coming, in which you see Gale in full hysterical meltdown, cleaning a perfectly pristine upper middle class home in just a streaking frenzy. It's very, very funny. But there's lots. They're just all over YouTube. No problem finding Chris Fleming material. So again, and again, Gale is a Massachusetts eccentric rooted in Fleming's own Massachusetts upbringing. He has very funny things to say about Massachusetts and its Puritan qualities. Its only update was Max Bach 20 since the Salem witch trial. And he really has some very funny things to say living in Massachusetts. And she's desperate to maintain, Gale is desperate to maintain her status always in the eyes of the community. As Fleming put it, quote, "Why I related to her so much is just the terror of how others perceive you." Fleming often references terror as to how his material, everything will be received, though he comes across as the opposite. You'd never guess he was terrified. That's one of the joys of watching it. He seems fully present and kind of happy and upbeat to be there. So it's really relaxing to watch him and hilarious. I first encountered Fleming in a riotous video making the rounds called Polyamory. Dolores, I think you sent it to me. I'm pretty sure. which featured a delightful song with the refrain, "It's never who you want to be polyamorous who's polyamorous." And it's about the experience of having smarmy, creepy friends, also played by Fleming, who announced to him in a threatening manner of their new sexually available status. It's very funny. Fleming's uninhibited songs and dances, with their fearless social commentary, ought to make him the pride of Skidmore College, where he got a theater degree, but graduated one credit shy of a minor in dance. So there's a mother lode of great Fleming comedy to be found online. But as Fleming put it, quote, and this is from the special, early in the special, "I'm trying to grow my audience beyond women who brought a knife to prom." And Live at the Palace is being reviewed in those terms as his most accessible bid yet for mainstream fame. I think he's kind of got a corner of it already,
Yeah.
but he's trying to go bigger with typically with which an HBO special is a classic way to do it.
Mhm.
So before we start discussing all this, please note, of course, there's going to be spoilers. We're going to tell you all sorts of things. So if you want all the jokes to be fresh and all the bits, you definitely should see it before you come back to this. So let's plunge into Chris Fleming's Live at the Palace. Dolores, what did you think?
Oh my God, I love him so much. I loved this so much. So I was first introduced to Chris Fleming, Eileen, on a trip to see you, to visit you.
Oh,
When our friends Asali and Emily, we all came out to visit Eileen in Buffalo. Had recently moved to Buffalo, and Asali, shout out, showed us Gail, and I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. I was totally hooked. And then I think the polyamorous video came my way like
yeah.
later. And then a hilarious rant. So if you follow Chris online, or even if you don't, you might he sometimes like rants in his car. That's one of his like formats. And he had a hilarious, I think it was a car rant, or maybe him just sitting in a field talking about how the 1995 action film Heat, starring Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, is one of the great gay love stories of all time.
Yeah.
Weeping. Okay, so he's reading against the grain. um, I love everything about him. I mean, his sensibility is hysterical, and it's mine. You know, like we share like cultural obsessions, I think.
Uh-huh.
And I don't. It's hard to characterize him, and we'll get into that in a second. Like I don't believe he identifies as a gay man necessarily, but he has an undeniably like queer sensibility, you know. So and a lot of his comedy is about gender and particularly masculinity and how he doesn't fit into it.
There's one called "Am I a Man?"
Well, I love him for so many reasons. I mean, I like he's interesting with his references. I think there is potential maybe for some like older folks to be shut out of certain things, because like his his cultural milieu is very like early, like late millennial and then younger. I'm a little older than he is. I think he's like in his
He's
late
39.
Okay. Yeah.
He's
So I'm 4 years older than he is.
39.
And he so there's like a little bit that might be a little bit, go over the heads of some people, but most of it is quite accessible, and he has his cultural references range. Like he'll make an Isadora Duncan joke.
Right.
So he has this genius. The way he like the form of his comedy is usually for him to just like free associate and then like fully commit. Like if a sign at Trader Joe's reminds him of an 8th grader writing the pegs on the back of someone's bike, he will just like run with that and develop it for like 3 minutes straight. And it's so insane and so wonderful. And I also like that I think his comedy is super thoughtful about gender and social roles, but not preachy at all. Zero preachiness. And there's like a basic kindness, I think, and like I don't know if it's an active desire not to alienate or just a byproduct of his style, but I think the way that he addresses these things is like very generous and like not meant to it's non-confrontational in a way that I think is like actually a huge strength. and he's such a doll too. I mean, I just like love him, and we could talk more. But he was on NPR's Wild Card. I think it was this week, and that's where the host asks you questions, like kind of deep personal questions, and he was very emotional. One of the questions was like, "Does a sign recur in your life?" And for him, it was a heron, and it had something to do with his mom, who I think has been sick for
Oh.
some time, but is still like here on this
Mhm.
earth. And he just, Chris just cried on NPR's
Oh.
card, and then the host did too. And there's something about him that's a breath of fresh air. He's real open, but
Mhm.
not in a way that's like confessional,
Mhm.
which is also refreshing. Like his comedy, even though you get to know things about him, it's not that like dark confessional kind of
Yeah.
comedy. It is it's a true mix of just like brilliant like ability to free associate, and also his like hilarious physical being, which is just like an interpretive dancer plus Gumby, plus I don't know what. So
Yes.
he's fucking nuts. I love him. And this special, I will say, I like this special a lot.
Mhm.
I think the special that predates this. So I think by now I've seen like all of the stand up on his social media.
Mhm.
Follow his Instagram if you want the freshest cuts.
Mhm.
There's more on Instagram even than YouTube. The special before this was on Peacock, and it was called Hell. And I mean, that had very many hilarious moments, but it was a little more like multimedia. Like there were some musical numbers, there were some like puppets, and that's great. And that's part of him. But this special, Live at the Palace at HBO, is a little more traditional, and I enjoyed it even a little bit more because I like just like regular stand up, and that's
Mhm.
what he delivered. So, what did you think, Eileen?
Oh, I also just loved it, and I think you're right, I loved the very traditional quality of it made things just pop so nicely. So he never stops moving. He just seems to be driven by an internal motor and this incredibly long, lean, lanky body that is just constantly jumping and prancing and moving and tackling a stool that's the main prop and slinging his microphone all around his body, and it's just like he can't stop, won't stop kind of thing. And so to have this giant, very old-fashioned looking stage with the traditional red velvet curtains, the proscenium arch, all of this stuff, to hold this this what is he? What is what well, we can get right in he gets right into, and I'm saying he, but as he keeps saying, anything I'll like I'll answer to he, she, they. He makes jokes about, he had his hilarious thing where he said, I forget what it was that he did, a special or a bit or something, and the result was, this is a quote from the special, a nationwide manhunt for my pronouns. And then he says, "Well, you tell me. You're looking at," which is the best line. Just to scream. So, yes, I mean, that is kind of a sharp in a way. He combines gentleness and sharpness in a way I struggle to get a beat. I struggle at every level, but I think I'm supposed to. I
Mhm.
think that's a big part of the queer sensibility revived fully in him. In
Yes.
that it's like, no, we don't do the categories here, or they're at least constantly shifting to the point as it becomes a kind of why bother.
Yep.
So you could say there's a kind of implied critique here of people who are way too inclined to hang on for all sorts of deleterious reasons to categories that have to be honored and respected constantly. And he's just like, we.
A great line, like, "I'm waiting for Gen Z to send me a full gender diagnosis in the mail." Like
Yes. 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 So the way he throws things into the lap of the gods in some ways, while in other ways, the precision is so minute sometimes. He does character studies all the time.
Yeah.
Um, and they're so particular. This is getting, it gets you have to kind of analyze because sometimes you're laughing and you're not even sure why. He's hit on something you never would have thought of.
Mhm.
But it suddenly will just seem so right that you just start knee jerk laughing and you're not even sure you fully get it. But then he's so polysyllabic and so literary in some ways in his descriptions of just extraordinary people, extraordinary types of people
Yeah.
that he encounters. And let me see if I can find a good one. Oh, I'm never gonna be able to find it. He's talking about a character, his normie character of Thomas. Oh yes. And again, this is a
Fun
quote
at
from
weddings, right?
what?
Thomas, who's fun at weddings.
Thomas, who's supposedly fun at weddings, exactly. And this is a tribute again from there's a big New York Times profile. The normie Thomas, who fancies himself a real wild man. Quote: Fleming puts together an absurdly specific portrait of this person. Mustache, thick thighs, under the delusion he's the life of the party at weddings. Fleming's friends keep insisting to him that Thomas is great. You've got to meet Thomas. They say he is so fun. He wears a kooky sock. And it's just, the kooky sock move. I sort of semi do it myself. It's for people who just like have no. And there you're looking at Chris Fleming. We'll get into what he looks like in a minute. So there's this, there's a combination and like more tribute to this quote unquote wild improvisational streak. I don't know how improv it is actually.
Mm-hmm.
Or how absolutely rehearsed and pre-planned. That would be an interesting thing to know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's combined with a high levels of precision in language. He delivers a conventional comparison that Dennis Miller might come up with. This is again the profile. Quote: These guys make Dave Bautista look like Bernadette Peters, and moves into a more satirically literary description that complements him acting out the wind-worn visage of a ferry worker.
That's about adolescent tuba players.
That's tuba player. He's claiming that the ultimate in masculinity is like in middle school. The tuba player, the person who plays the tuba, has got to be an outsized, guy usually, because it's the only child who can stand up under the weight of the tuba. So they're these gigantic, gentle giants because they have nothing to prove. They're so extraordinarily huge and masculine. And there is no aggression. Then he compares them to the Great Danes of the dog world as opposed to the much more aggressive and antsy German Shepherd because the German Shepherd isn't quite huge.
Yeah.
And still has things to prove. And it just goes on and on with comparisons, and it's just at a rapid rate. So again, you're kind of playing catch up with a lot of his observations, which will strike you emotionally as right before your mind can catch up with you, what you're hearing, which is an effect I tend to love. Even in watching movies, there's a quality. This is another reason I love the Coen brothers. They will get into the specifics of character and situation in a way that has the same quality of it seems right emotionally before your mind can figure out what they're doing. And sometimes your mind can never really come up with a kind of analysis, a tidy analysis of what's happening. But your whole being responds to the rightness, which to me is genius. That is the definition of genius. And they'll interview the Coens, and the Coens will say, someone will say, always be saying, why? In Miller's Crossing, why is a hat blowing through the woods? And they'll be like, we don't know. Seems right, though, doesn't it? I mean, they just, and you're like, yes.
Yeah.
It does seem right. And there's a ton of that with Chris Fleming of like, seems right. Does some instinct, some homing instinct toward the hilarious in a kind of social observation is this gift he has.
Yes.
That's really spectacular, and it makes you feel better. It's a kind of the strangest feel good experience ever. In that again, you're not sure why is this making me feel so good. It's just something about him. He exudes a kind of benevolence and a generosity, even while his mind is slicing and dicing. You'd be a little fearful of being at a party with him. Or, would you be the next one being described in, very astute terms, but as, are you the normie of this group who's going to be, who's going to fancy yourself or be fancied as fun at parties?
I mean, that's the thing. So that's a primary obsession of his is like the definition of like weirdness
Yes.
or nerd in this day and age. Probably my favorite Chris Fleming skit of all time revolves around Richard Simmons.
That's perfect.
Don't know who Richard Simmons is because you were
Mm.
born in the year 2000 or after. Just
Yeah.
like Google this man, okay? Like a
Oh,
flagrantly gay guy with a white guy, but with an afro,
yeah.
who would wear short shorts with some kind of like very coordinated outfit that
Yeah, tiny tank tops, tiny shorts, so he's revealing everything of this incredibly pasty white skin.
yes. And he would lead workouts and like I think mostly for older ladies, right?
Yes.
And, and he was a
Hugely
staple.
popular, zillionaire. Yeah.
Yes, like he was daytime TV in the 80s and 90s, right?
Yes.
And like and like crazy, he was like a weird little gremlin, like hyper enthusiastic, And so Fleming has this great like, look, you couldn't handle Simmons today, okay? And he talks about all these people like St. Vincent and all these pop stars who are like, he's like, please, like all these people have been put through a focus group of NYU undergraduates to like determine if their like weirdness or I'm such a weirdo or I'm such a nerd is like sexy enough and palatable enough, to be put on the world stage. And I love him for this because it's so true. Like, please, like Saint Vincent is not a weirdo,
Yeah.
okay? Lady Gaga is not even a weirdo.
Mhm.
And Fleming is like, look, like I was a theater major and I was in theater camp with a guy who was also, I don't know what, like an engineer or something, who would just like eat cereal with his face. I don't know, whatever it is, like a total social pariah.
Yeah.
And then the bit circles back to Simmons. I'm not going to ruin it for you, but it's like a compare and a contrast with like he calls like Timothy Chalamet and Zendaya like Sephora beach children who developed a lab in Santa Barbara, and he's like,
Yes,
we
yes.
need them now because like we have 4K, and
Mhm.
he's like, look, even just consider Willy Wonka, like. Could you imagine Gene Wilder in 4K?
Mm.
And so he's doing this like really wonderful, like pretty high level media diagnosis, but like lamenting the loss of all the
Yes,
weirdos in the culture.
yes.
And it ends with I can't even tell you because it's so spectacular, but the best Richard Simmons anecdote that exists. So just yeah, I'm not
Okay,
gonna ruin it
yeah,
for you.
yes.
But that's one of Fleming's primary obsessions is
Yes.
like how at some point in the last 10 years, everyone's been calling themselves like, oh, I'm such a dork, I'm such a weirdo, I'm such a
Yes.
nerd. He's like, please.
Gotta get in the game, yes. And
Yeah.
he's got references there. They're more it's again Thomas is being the figure of and Thomas apparently to amuse people at weddings does an interpretive dance.
Yes.
It's like normies, there's nothing fucking funny about interpretive dance. My costume is not your culture.
Yeah.
This menacing. He's got a very deep voice that he can use to incongruous, really great incongruous effects given how he's just pencil thin, with floppy curly hair. But yes, it's I think that's one of his touchstone things that he can now reliably go to. And again, you're looking at him at
Yeah.
it as he puts it. And we should really talk about before it was to set the scene
Yeah.
of how he looks. He's spectacularly dressed in
Okay.
a kind of glam rock outfit. It's a low cut and it has a high collar, purple jumpsuit, very Prince purple, with detachable sleeves, which early in the special he unzips and does a little mini striptease of tossing into the wings. And he's got the sparkly red shoes, the Wizard of Oz shoes we already mentioned. And his look was designed by Anthony Sartino. Again, and the New York Times has many profiles of Fleming at this point. There's a whole interview with Sartino, who
Wild.
was Prince's designer for many, many years.
Oh my God.
And they
And
have all these photos of Prince looking, of course, sensational. Yeah,
Fleming says he's really inspired by Prince in the way
yeah,
that Prince kept certain things like mysterious, like about his gender and
yes,
sexuality in particular,
yeah.
And Fleming's like, I don't know, I'm not gonna, I don't want to answer all these questions. It's so much more powerful if you just let it be.
Let it be.
Yeah,
Present yourself as this whole being.
yeah,
It does not fit. It's a very I contain multitudes stance that seems bold and it's exciting. It's exciting, and again, the quality of a kind of fearlessness.
Yeah.
You figure it out. I don't know. And there's nothing, and it shouldn't be this bite-sized thing that goes into this tiny container, which
Mhm.
is to me exactly right. Exactly. I'm always distressed at the way, we are into kind of like I'm such a nerd or I'm this type or that type, and
Yes.
it gets flung around, and it's usually quite, I don't know. It's the super limitations on everybody,
Yeah.
is a problem that he seems to be finding ways to tunnel under and bust up in a way that's wonderful.
Yeah.
But yes, so then they quote, Anthony Sartino saying, "Okay, he comes to me. He says I like to do my research. He's tumbling all over. He's running, and I'm thinking, okay, four-way stretch jumpsuit. It just makes sense. When I saw him, he had a rock star body, and it's very 70s. He's got a very 70s build
Yeah.
in every way, and long curly hair, also 70s. And I thought, I'm going to make a rock star comedian. I mean, he has this wonderful jeweled, jeweled brooch at the small of his back, and the back of the
Yes.
little waistband on his jumpsuit. That is a flourish that I just can't admire enough.
The dragonfly, which is everything about him is so like Oscar Wilde-y or something.
Yes,
Like it's
yes.
great. He's
And
great in
and with that kind of glee, which is very wild. Wild arrives in America and says, "I have," at customs. It says, "I have nothing to declare but my genius," which is, it's just like French kiss, man. That's so beautiful. And I don't know that Fleming would say anything that self-aggrandizing,
right.
but that gleeful spirit seems to just fill him. And so, of course, that's part of the delight of watching him. When he talks about getting to LA and immediately getting a jaywalking ticket. And he talks about it. Yeah, it's true. He's become inclined towards something like, what does he say? Fancy street dressage.
Yeah.
He does this prancing and horses, this prancing across the stage, and you can just picture him going across a crosswalk and freaking out some cop. So yeah, so there's a kind of challenge, a kind of critique, but again, because he seems equally to be working with his own oddity
Mhm.
in appreciation, as well as, not always, but often, to be able to work with the world's oddity and people's oddity, usually with appreciation. He's a
Yes.
little hard on normies, but but overall,
He's
there's
not corny.
tremendous affection. Yeah,
Only because they want credit for things that
for
true
things.
weirdos pioneered and suffered for.
Exactly. And still, there are still, if you pay attention, this is the thing, we don't pay attention to people anymore, I'm convinced. He's still doing something that is not that common anymore. Even though you've got a million stand-up comics who are supposedly all observing everything, but I'm always just like,
Are they?
are they?
Yeah.
Again, another example of like people saying that the dialogue people use in movies is very realistic, and I'm like, do you listen to people?
Yeah.
People have so much more extremity in their speech qualities than tend to make it into scripts, because people think that's too big, that's artificial. And it's like, you're not, certainly with Americans. I can't speak to the world, but American speech and the way people present themselves, you're in this constant world of wild eccentricity, strange behaviors that you have to interpret. He seems very locked into that. So he has a hilarious lengthy bit about going. He's in Saratoga Springs with his guy friends, as he keeps saying. And he goes to a place called Hatsational. I've seen the place. And apparently there's two branches because there's such a demand for hats for some reason in Saratoga Springs, because it's a racetrack town. I have no idea. And so he's in there and he talks about this this demon boy who apparently runs the place, who's so nattily dressed that he's just scorns everyone else who's not as natty, and he winds up under all this pressure of dealing with this kid buying hats, super expensive hats for himself and his guy friends, and overdrawing his bank account. And in the end, he's like, "Yeah, you find this all pretty suspect, right? You don't believe the guy friends." And then he shows giant blow up photos of him and his friends in the hats, the demon boy, the receipt for the hats. I mean, the everything. He's like, "Do you think I'm playing here? Do you think I need to bring the receipt?" So there's that kind of encounter that for him, how many people go to Hatsational just
Yeah.
as part of your tourist strolling through Saratoga Springs, somehow absorb this insane weirdness and just go on
Yeah.
without commenting, but he's got this massive bit in his comedy special, and he's not exaggerating. It's
No,
really great. It's
it's
really
so
great.
true. You're right. It's like very detailed observation of human behavior is at the heart of
Yeah,
it, you know?
yeah, with a kind of sense of it being freeing
Yes.
to not only know you've got this deep weirdness, but it's everywhere. You just have to put yourself on the wavelength, and it will offer itself up to you.
It's so good.
Yeah. And
So
it's true, you won't find a weirder shot than him with his apparently actual guy friends in their hats. You're just like, "Oh my god."
he's so funny. I mean, he's long been a darling of like, I don't know what you would call it, like, liberal arts grads.
Uh-huh.
The art crowd,
The art crowd, yeah.
But I do, like I was saying earlier, I do love the way he does like gender critique because
Mhm.
it's so, I mean, it's all out there, but he's not uh calling upon you to take an obvious stand,
Yeah.
right? Uh,
Mhm.
um, so he's from Massachusetts, so he's like steeped in the Salem witch trials and that history, right? And he's got this whole bit about like the men who were tossed in with the witches and at the Salem witch trial.
Oh, I gotta hear that one.
Yeah, he's like a couple of he hims got tossed in there with the honey. Um, it's like guys who journal, stuff
Okay.
like that. It's so fucking hilarious. And because he's from Massachusetts, there's that like hyper masculine Boston culture. And
Yeah.
I also recommend looking up the bit where he spends an afternoon at the super masculine comedian from Boston, Bill Burr's
Bill
house.
Burr's house. Yes, I've read parts of that. Oh my god.
Oh my God. It's all, so much of the comedy revolves around like, I think women for him are like divine beings, and he's like very, those are his friends and he's very interested in them. But even there are bits about like the snacks at Trader Joe's that only women can find.
And it becomes a transcendent experience for women. And again, it does seem like by the end, it's this huge tribute to women who live who live in this more magical, abstract world than you. You don't identify as a woman. You can see the Trader Joe's snacks that are visible to men.
And your ancestors, your foremothers are guiding you, and you're
Yes,
gonna meet like your future daughter in the frozen aisle or whatever. Like her spirit will come through you. It's
yes.
hysterical. But and then like at the other end is like he's terrified of like hyper masculine men.
Yes, yes.
And he's got this, there's some other bit, but I would say like this distills it. Like he talks about the relationship between brothers and how it's the most anciently fraught relationship for reasons like no one can understand. And he's like, brothers have been like living in a rent controlled apartment in ancient Sparta, like brothers are the sort of people who say to each other, how can you do this to me? And he's clearly like outside both groups, and he's so funny. In another context, he says, he washed up on a shore. He has neither the divine feminine nor the damned masculine, and he just like washed up on the shore with like no qualities from either group.
Right. Well, yes, how does he put it in restaurants? They go, and when someone's taking orders, they go, children. What is it? Children,
Women.
women, Chris.
Yeah.
Is that right? And then men? He's in some strange lineup category of his own.
Yep.
Yes, that he does. And he does have because sometimes he will seem to identify as a gay male.
Uh-huh.
So like if you watch there's a little video called I'm Afraid to Talk to Men, and he's a long music video about his terror. And he's like, I don't know what's good and bad about cars. like cliches of what you're supposed to. He's like he can maintain for a couple of minutes, but then, you know, they're gonna find out, as he puts it, I'm a big gay poodle and I can't talk for more than 2 minutes without mentioning Tracy Chapman or Liza Minnelli. It's all gonna come out. So, that's more, that's less transcendent humor. It's a more direct fear that
Yeah.
seems to pin him down more, and then but in other in other terms, he'll just go, "I don't know. I don't even know how to categorize myself. It's fabulous." Yes, he's a scream because I think that's very like what was said in the profile I quoted, where it can go from kind of the generic humor that you recognize. But
Yes.
then what you're waiting for is the full flight into the high literary, into myth, into transcendent historical comparisons.
Yes.
Yeah, you're waiting for him to go for the heights. And sometimes, he's got a whole series of stratagems strategies in the special for how to deal. I'm sure he's just like every stand-up comedian you have to have for when the bit doesn't go over or the audience lags trying to like compute all that they haven't gotten it yet. He's just got so many beautiful ways of handling. He'll use this stool as a notepad. Yeah, cut bit about, or he stamps into. There's a camera waiting in the wings, and they'll rush into close up saying, "It's all useless. None of it works." So he's many, many hilarious comments and ways of handling. Like they haven't quite got, or they're totally bewildered. Like people are totally lost.
It's so
And
true. Or
yeah.
he'll run back and forth and he'll like shout out to the spotlight operator and say like
Yes.
the spotlight operator is on
Yes.
the team we got Osama.
He's the guy who got Osama because, of course, he's constantly moving, and then he, of course, tries to outrun the spotlight, for a minute, and the guy's like, the spotlight is right on him the entire time. Yes, that's one of the most quoted moments of the show. It's yes, so he's really presenting himself as the most delightful none such. There is none like him, none. And that you get to spend all this time with this being who can recategorize so many things for you in ways that feel refreshing and freeing.
And the magic and the myth that you raised, I think that's
Mm,
really important. And I've heard him categorize his um I don't know if he categorizes his work this way or if it's something that draws him, but like magical realism is really
mhm,
important to him. And like that is the I don't know, I guess that's what you would call the sort of form of the bits, is like something, whether it's a Trader Joe's like recall notice or whatever, like morphs into something else and
mhm,
becomes personified,
mhm,
and then he takes it to the nth degree,
mhm.
into the heights, as you say. So that's one of his, and he's like, I want life to be magical. I want to give that to the audience to
Richard Blanche to Wall. I don't want realism. I want magic. Yes, and he also says very astute things about the material he's doing, which is so hard to we struggled, for example, trying to come up with a title for the episode and finally just took the plainest. We used saving stand-up comedy because he's so refreshing in a kind of form that's getting to be an older form and still a highly populated, and popular form, but it needs refreshing. And he's really someone who's doing a lot of reinvention. But he talks about, one quote he's got is he's got a very non-pandering attitude, and he says, um, "Anything I've ever made, no one's asked for." there, there is no demand, but at the same time, he's one of his inspirations is from David Bowie, who said, "Never play to the gallery. Never work for other people in what you do." And
Yeah.
in another interview, he does best advice, worst advice. It was a question from the interviewer, and he said, "Best advice: Rick Jenkins, owner of Comedy Studio, taught me that through clarity with your audience, even the most absurd idea can be accessible, and also that no idea is too absurd." So it's just the sky is the limit, but clarity, clarity. I used to say to my students, and they just stare at me. This is so long ago. When it came to writing, I'm like, some of you are trying to seem like good writers by being fancier and using longer words. Like, clarity is beauty.
Mhm.
And they just be like, "No, lady, what's your deal?" So it was really lump in the throat for me to see this. Clarity is the key. You
Mhm.
have to lock it in for the audience because it's gonna be so high flown
Mhm.
sometimes and so specific to him that how you even communicate a worldview that seems very, very particular becomes, you can see, it's all that precision of language thing again. And then he says the worst comedy advice was from an old college acquaintance who told me to be more mainstream. And it's true. You just look at him and think that would have been death. He
Mhm.
can't come out in front of a brick wall at a classic comedy and say, talk about airplane food and
Right.
or if he does, he's going to do something so incredible with
Wacky as shit,
that
yeah.
it's hard to imagine him doing any of the most typical, cliche jokes. He just can't do that kind of move.
No.
And he also is very aware of this is a very sweet quote about my aesthetic. He says, "I would describe it as a kind of gentle flamboyance because I'm afraid of overwhelming people."
Aw.
And that's that's was in the context of what he's wearing in the special.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And a lot of people would probably look at his his four-way stretch purple jumpsuit and think, "I don't know how gentle it is." But he's very conscious of just people can't take everything.
Uh-huh.
So that benevolence again comes out, like, not only thinking always of the audience, super audience conscious in a way that's really admirable.
Yeah.
Um, but a kindliness, like, they can't handle all of me at once in a
Yeah.
true shocking fashion. But on the other hand, I gotta be me. So how do you balance these things? So that's very that nice precision again, which if you're, a horribly jaded academic and scarred and everything, there's such a that's so lovely. That's lovely.
Have you had the chance to see him on late night by any chance?
No, I haven't. How
Okay,
is that?
he did Kimmel, and it
Oh
was
my
really
god.
interesting. Yeah, because he's so Chris is so he really is actually like wilder in person than
Yeah.
on stage. Like his
Okay.
mind was just like everywhere. I was like,
Mhm.
woo. There's definitely something about his stand-up persona that's more like, believe it or not,
Uh-huh.
channeled, like funneled, like whittled down.
Right.
And
Oh,
maybe it was
wow.
nerves or whatever, but yeah, he is a live wire.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, which was interesting because I almost expected him to be like calm or something off stage.
Yes, I think I that's what I was expecting.
Yeah, he is not
Wow.
that. At least as far as I could tell. He was pretty wacky, like ping 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 ping.
And
He
how did Kimmel handle it? Getting more stolid to balance him or
sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, Kimmel was, I would say, a little overwhelmed. And it reminded me, Fleming has this bit. Fleming seems to love dogs, Eileen, which is like,
Oh, that
that
makes me very happy.
yeah,
Yeah.
you guys vibe. He's got a lot of bits about dogs, and I think his family has an Australian Shepherd, so
Mhm.
he has this bit, and I'm saying this because Fleming himself reminds me of the way he describes the Australian Shepherd. He's like, having an Australian Shepherd is like having like a genius in your home, like someone who's like constantly stalking around plotting, how can I best Amadeus? You know?
That's right, because those are the scary smart dogs. I'm always amazed that anyone can own, like, a border collie.
Yeah.
You wanna be freaked out? Oh my god.
Exactly. And he's like, look, if you don't let it finish Tolkien, it will, or take a creative writing class, it will strip the popper piping from your home and sell it to Cuba.
And that's right, he does do a bit on dogs in the special.
He does.
What does he say? "The older the breed, the stranger the description of what they were bred for," and he does what is
Yes.
it, the Clumber Spaniel? The Cumber Spaniel?
Yep. Yep.
And, he just says a plank position, and he says they were bred they were bred to stand over a hole in the ground in case the devil might come out. And it just shows this dog standing over the hole, just looking like can stand there indefinitely. Ready, ready. It's beautiful.
So
It's
good. It's
beautiful.
so good. Anyway, my take on him is he's the Australian Shepherd, and from the way he describes his upbringing, he's from a small town in central Massachusetts. I think his sister was like the star of the town, beloved, um,
Oh,
the valedictorian or some kind of dictorian for for their school, and he was not as good in school. He's like, so I skated on the goodwill that she created for a bit, and then people figured out like, oh, this one's different.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I don't think he was like great in school, although he's obviously brilliant,
Yeah.
So I think his mind, I'm glad he has comedy. That's all I'll say.
Oh, yeah, no, it's talk about someone who's got to have an outlet, and
Yeah.
you feel, yes, he's blessed in this outlet that he has found. I
Yeah.
was, like, envious, literally, like, this seems like a fully lived life I'm looking at right here.
Yep.
And he tells his childhood stories are wonderful, like, about Massachusetts and stuff, but my favorite, I read about a formative someone asked in an interview, I was reading all sorts of interviews, about
Yeah.
a formative childhood experience that represents his whole life, no pressure that he's
Ooh.
supposed to use, and he has one. And he says, "When I was young, my mom, my sister, and I were leaving the ophthalmologist, and there was a tropical storm deluge, and my mom said, 'Okay, at the count of 3, we're gonna run to the car. 1, 2, and on 2, I ran into the storm, away from my family and the car.'"
Wow.
That
Wow.
is indeed an epic child story. That's epic.
That's
That
great.
that tells you there's something else going on from the
Yeah.
get-go that is going to have to be dealt with. Yeah, so it's very well, no, when he talks I think it's called Stowe, is that right? The little town in Massachusetts, I
I don't
think
know.
it's not somewhere. I think that's it. I know you've never heard of it, but it looks like, when you see his mom,
Mhm.
his mom is exactly the kind of middle class, upper middle class, I can't quite tell,
Yeah.
but it's going to be, nice home, nice lady, it's all very nice, but at
Yep.
the same time, there she is playing Gail's best friend and all of this stuff, and his father, I guess, plays the pant legs of the father, the pants, the feet,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
bottom never fully shown. But at any rate, so it reminds me a lot of John Waters, actually, who
Aha.
comes from, conservative, I think it's middle class, upper middle class,
Just yeah.
Baltimore though, but, very the kind of cliche nice, depending on, but definitely Republican parent, conservative parents, and yet astoundingly supportive of their son. I
Yeah.
mean, super supportive of this son who, as John Waters says, "I was the son you didn't talk about before I became famous." Like, he didn't refer all the other children would be asked about, and no one would speak about what's the deal with John? Because
Oh
talk about too
my god.
much, too weird. John Waters was setting quite a standard. So, but once he became famous, then everyone asks, as he said, then everyone asked about me after that, but nobody before, because that's the son in the basement or whatever, or the one that's like, "What?" So yeah, something similar in coming from a kind of very straight, very
Yep.
conservative background, and just being this kind of what is it
Yeah.
that has to kind of self-define in a world that's not always, usually not at all kind to any difference. I mean, it's funny to me that Dolores and I, among the first things we bonded about when we were talking more as friends than anything, was too much for the room, right? It
Yeah.
was the feeling of like the Dolores even more than me, but I would feel this way is ludicrous.
Hmm.
Ludicrous. I am so not too much for any room. But finding myself in the academy, anyone with with a pulse is too much for me. You have to bring yourself down to a level of just I don't even know how to describe what socializing in academia is like. You're just like, "God, is there a really boring article I could claim I'm trying to write that I summarize it tremendously?" I don't know. What would you even have to do to be boring enough? Dolores had an ability to get people going.
Oh, that's
Get
kind of
get
true.
women academics who were famous to drink and do crazy stuff, but I had no such ability. So I was always just like was a lead weight on me. But so to even have an inkling of and I was a freaky little kid, I admit that didn't fit in and all that. But it's just a weird thing to even have caught just an edge of the too much, and then to witness someone who's lived fully in
Yep.
the always too much and is always having to negotiate the responses. He says the terror of people's you know
Yeah.
response to you.
Yeah, and he hints at it like he's not confessional in the way that he's going to say like and as far as we can tell by the way, like I think he was fairly popular and well liked throughout
Yeah,
school.
he seems to have tons of friends and a booming
Yeah.
social life and all that
Yeah.
jazz. Yeah.
But he
I mean, there
turned
aren't
his
tales of, as far as I know, are there, of him being beaten up or
no, not at all. He said he was friends with the jocks until really until like a certain period of high school, and then he just kind of turned his back on it because I don't know, it wasn't for him. Like he just wanted to
Mm.
like live differently, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
um and he doesn't say how that affected him. He talks about getting recognition as a comedian and going into an agent's office, and the agents being about to sign him, but then being like, what's with the women's clothes, and he'll say like, yeah, that was a weird moment or whatever, but you don't hear him talk. He does not speak like a narrative of oppression. He just kind of like lets it be. It's clearly been an issue even in his career,
Right. Right.
and sometimes, by the way, he'll wear like a sundress. Like like, he's pretty out there with his
Mhm.
fashion.
Mhm.
Um, and he's interesting because he is like so much good comedy. I mean, he's of his moment. He has like a more recent sketch about having a crush. He's like, a crush in this day and age? He's like, no, you gotta know. Like you are moving to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and you're getting chickens. He's like, a crush is for the summer of 2005. Like, it's not like he doesn't deal with like the political climate,
Mhm.
although I don't think he ever speaks the name Trump, and nor do I think he would. Like his
Yeah.
vision is broader than that.
Yes.
um so I don't know. He's not, but he's also not immune to political. I mean, all of the gender stuff is
Yeah.
implicitly political, obviously.
Right.
He
Right.
just doesn't make it explicit in a way that's like gives you an obvious like ideological takeaway.
Yeah. Which is another typical, very typical stand-up comedy move. You just
Yep.
go instantly for today's headlines, that kind of
Yep.
thing. Yeah. 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 And
So,
yeah, it's hard to imagine. I mean, an example of his topical would be his obsession with Terry Gross of NPR, his whole NPR obsession, which he admits to. That at one point his car was being worked on and they were playing. He does a bit about it. He's playing some wild funkadelic amazing song, and then they pull up to him to give him his car back and switch it to NPR because they didn't
yeah.
read. And so yeah, then he does this hilarious bit, which is true. I looked it up, that Terry Gross is interviewing Adam Driver, and Adam Driver hates to hear his own work quote, played.
Hmm.
She plays it anyway. She plays him singing the song "Being Alive" from Marriage Story, which I hated Marriage Story so much. I'm just like, well, I would consider that cruel too. But she insists on playing it, and apparently he fled the interview. He left the studio. Just left him, and there they are, and so he does a whole so Fleming does a whole bit on on the sadism of Terry Gross, and then he pictures her, on the opposite end of a long medieval table from the guest, quietly loading a gun while interviewing
Cleaning
people.
a gun.
What?
Cleaning a gun.
Cleaning a gun. Oh, sorry. I thought it was cleaning. That's right. Cleaning a gun. So this kind of strange, threatening air that she has, that he's honed in on, and so he does this whole bit of her just ruthlessly chasing down Adam Driver, and he keeps stipulating ex-Marine, a former Marine, Adam Driver. So he's very tall, kind of gangly, but still he's an ex-Marine,
Yeah.
and he's running for his life in this galumphing pace that is a perfect imitation of Adam Driver. He does beautiful Adam Driver running, Terry Gross running with total tight discipline. She's like, when I catch you, and I will catch you, and she's running after him, and she's got a boombox playing the Marriage Story
Be
song.
alive.
And she finally tackles him and is torturing him as he begs for mercy. And she says, "You don't get to call me by Terry Gross. That's my nickname. My real name is Teresa Disgusting." All these threatening, demonic voice. Why is it right? I don't know. Except that if you go to a lot of her Fresh Air interviews, there's a tremendous amount of kind of tension
Mhm.
among all this kind of niceness. It's all very soft NPR-ishness.
Yeah.
But there's something about even though I don't listen to her hardly ever, but even in the few I've listened to, I've been like, There's something so off-putting. What is it?
I don't know, but it's true. I mean, sometimes the questions are just like too intrusive, but
Yes.
it's posed in a format that's associated with respectability,
Exactly.
NPR, right?
Mhm.
Terry Gross. So it's like, okay, I remember like Jean Smart got interviewed very shortly after her husband died, and Terry Gross's questions are just like, how does it feel?
Oh god.
Are you alone? Like, what's
Oh
it?
my god.
You're just like, oh my god, like, give her a second.
No, that's it. That is it. There's this,
Yeah,
yes, that's exactly it. The respectable tone of NPR, which is, it almost works, it's kind of slightly sleep inducing. You it can kind of let your mind just drift. But then, yes, there's this, again, this sinister edge.
yep,
Just
getting
found
the
it,
goods.
found it. Yeah. So,
He's
yes, that
he's
was
like
inspired.
the Terry Gross interviews seem to take place in the realm between life and death.
There is something like people are trapped in a somewhat sinister limbo with Terry Gross. I think that seems exactly right. So that's a great example
Yeah.
of following him and what seem to be kind of insane flights of fancy that are getting more and more specific yet elaborate. But when he's on, and he's almost always on. He's almost always on it, and almost always you're like, "Yep, that's right. He's nailed something down here." So that's about as topical as he gets. Is a character that you know who operates in the world, but he's got a completely unique way of of representing them to the world. So yeah, but that actually did happen. So yeah,
Yeah.
he is. It's not like he isn't attuned to what's happening in the world.
Oh,
It's
no.
just not going to be at the latest headline about Trump. That's for sure.
Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. What a breath of fresh air. Cannot recommend this enough. I don't know about you, Eileen. There's nothing I want to see on TV right now. Like
It's
no,
pretty bad right now. Yeah.
nothing. Is it because everything is under the,
Yeah.
thumb of Nexstar and we're just gonna have cop procedurals now until we die? Like probably,
And are we just in such hell culturally that we finally gotten to the point that watching the products of the culture are just, it's just getting harder and harder and harder. I don't know. I don't even know anymore. I think
I'm
all of
there.
us are like floundering, like, what are
Yeah.
we even in here? Yeah.
This is the only original feeling thing I have seen in, I don't know, a year on TV, 2 years. I mean,
Yeah.
with the exception of my beloved Hacks, like what the hell else is there? so,
Yeah. And
so
it's hard because I keep trying, it is so unique yet seems somehow pertinent in a way that makes me want to try to have, it's sad to say, categorize or something,
yeah,
come up with a way of describing, and I've struggled and beyond what we've already said.
yeah,
There's not a tidy way, but the one thing I thought is we could compare him to another hot up and coming stand, and I thought of Josh Johnson, who's just announced he has an HBO special coming up.
yeah.
And he's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. There's just endless amount of video, stand-up video stuff on every topic you can practically imagine. He's on The Daily Show. I
Mhm,
mean, he's just all over the place, and he's so different.
mhm.
He can be very, very funny too, very, very insightful too, but it's almost an opposite effect. It's very quiet,
Mhm.
it's very gentle. There's no he wears, like, a hoodie and jeans. It's completely the most generic streetwear any young man, I think he said somewhere in his 30s could wear.
Mhm.
It's almost the opposite of the language precision and specificity thing.
Yep.
You know, there's a lot of trailing off. It's a lot of very accessible language. I don't know, very colloquially used, a lot of hesitations, pauses. I don't know, that kind of blah blah. And he'll often sort of set up a whatever the topic of that he's making observations on, and then trail off in a kind of nonverbal, you know what I mean, kind of thing once the audience is laughing. So he almost doesn't finish the thought. It's the opposite
Very
of,
right. Fleming drills down and creates a whole 20-minute sequence.
yes,
I,
it gets more and more
I,
granular in its specificity. Yes, and that's would be the, perhaps if there can be a typical maneuver, that would be it. And this is the absolute dead opposite. And
yeah.
it seems very earnest. He seems like a very gentle, saying there's a kind of benevolence in both,
Yes.
however. Very gentle, very sweet. Seems like very sweet-natured, and not at all aggressive in a stand-up comedian that would be typical of many stand-up comedians. There's a lot of aggressivity. There can be a lot of punching in every direction, but including punching down. There can be a lot of harshness in stand-up comedy to get laughs. Josh Johnson also doesn't do any of that.
Mhm.
Super sweet, super gentle. Sometimes it's just observational, like a little mini, almost essay-like form on some topic. He said very earnest things about the importance of art, and the beauty
Yep.
of art, and how we can't think of it in terms of needing to make money. I assume this was coming off of the Timothy Chalamet dissing
Yeah, it
opera and
was.
ballet. It seemed like it was. But at least the section that's traveling around, it didn't lead to jokes. And sometimes he makes a series of statements that seem quite earnest, and they don't lead to laughs.
Mhm.
So it's with a little bit of overlap and just a couple of qualities, completely different approaches, completely different ways of addressing the world.
Mhm.
Both, it seems to me, ascending very, very rapidly to
Mhm.
greater and greater fame. Maybe Johnson, because he's just more mainstream,
Right.
faster. But that's interesting. If he can be opposed, like if he can be opposed, Fleming's so specific, he can be opposed to a lot of people. That's one way of kind of getting a beat on how different, how completely different. Yeah. Especially the appearance has to be dealt with versus the appearance absolutely doesn't have to be dealt with, because Josh Johnson looks like just anybody off the
Mhm.
street.
Mhm.
Right. So I mean, I guess you could say race in a way, but
Mhm.
Josh Johnson is black, but even that.
I mean, Josh Johnson could, like, run for president and be, like, not controversial, you know?
Absolutely.
Like,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. Yes.
Fleming's definitely doing something different. I like them both. Yeah, I really like
Me
Josh
too, me
Johnson.
too, which is why that occurred to me, that like, wow, and
It's a
both have sweetness and benevolence, but taken in completely different directions. So, yes, good
really
counterpoints. I can also watch Johnson.
yeah.
So, I can watch Johnson, I can watch Fleming, it's nice.
The Mark Maron had, Chris Fleming on his show
Mm,
recently. I find Mark Maron pretty hard to take, I
I
gotta
do
be
too, I
honest.
cannot
Woo!
spend
Yeah.
any time.
But it's interesting because he has a certain point of view, a more
Mm,
traditional, like, boomer comic, or I don't know, point of view.
yeah,
And he kind of framed Fleming as he loved Fleming.
mhm,
But he's like, you're kind of like you're of that like new school with like Hannah Einbinder. And I guess I see that.
mhm,
Like Einbinder, if you saw her HBO special, she's actually not really going for even traditional jokes.
mhm,
It's like almost kind of a different
right, yeah,
yeah.
mhm,
So that's how she's alt. Fleming is going for the laughs.
mhm,
He just has his commitment to his magical realism. I think is like what sets him apart. Like
mhm,
Fleming is dealing in true flights of fancy,
mhm,
in ways that other comedians are not. You know,
right. At least
so
not that I know of, yeah, yeah,
no, no. And to me, that fantasy or that fantastical element is like deliverance.
mhm,
It's so what a balm. Like I listen to him before bed all the time. He just makes me feel better.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah.
So I don't know. I think we both give this our hearty endorsement.
Oh, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
really delightful, and really it seems particularly soothing in ways we've sort of tried to articulate and maybe haven't fully been, but, it's worth catching yourself to see if you agree.
Yeah.
That is something as flappy and popping could also be very, very soothing and helpful at a time
Mhm.
when everything is so bad. Yeah, it's really worth delving into even further. So yes, highly recommended, and I think we'll stop there.
Yep.
We've done our damnedest for Chris Fleming, who we love. And that's it for our episode entitled so simply Chris Fleming is saving stand-up comedy. Thanks, dear listeners, and of course, triple thanks to our subscribers who keep us in purple jumpsuits and bedazzled capizios. If you're not a subscriber yet, but you like what you hear, please consider signing up with Patreon for all the Films on content instead of just the half that's available to the public, including also video episodes that are also available on YouTube for half the episodes, including this one. You can follow News of the Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Join us in 2 weeks for more fabulous film conversation. And until then, we wish you happy viewing, everyone. Bye.